Hello and welcome back to this video series where we're looking at building our own custom application using Up's API. In this video, we're actually going to start building our application, which is very exciting. So the first part we're going to build is a Node API layer that's going to sit between our React application that we'll build in the next video and the Up API. So this is a little proxy layer that's basically just going to attach our personal access token so that we don't need to expose that in the front end. This means that we can actually give our front-end application to different people if we want them to have a look, if we don't mind them seeing our banking details, without actually giving them our personal access token. So I'm going to open up Terminal here, and I'm going to create a new folder for our transactions application, and then I'm just going to create a new folder for our server. So we're going to be separating these out into a server and a client. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a new npm project, and then I'm going to install Express and Axios. So Express is what we're going to use to build our API quickly. Axios is what we're going to use to actually make requests to the Up's API. The next thing I'm going to do is install a dev dependency called NodeMon. And this is just going to allow us to restart the server anytime there are changes. I'm now going to open this up in VS Code. And first thing I'm going to do is create a start script in package.json, which is just going to call NodeMon index.js. And then I'm going to create our index.js and start building out our Express application. Okay, so what I've built out here is pulling in the Express package, setting a port to either the environments port or port 5000, creating a new instance of the Express app, and then creating an endpoint for ping that's just going to respond with the word pong. And then I'm setting up the app to listen on that specific port and just print out that we're listening there. So now if I type npm start, should see that that's now listening on port 5000. And if I go to localhost over port 5000 and go to the ping endpoint, then I should see pong. So everything is working correctly there. So the next thing we're going to do is create a new GET request or a new GET route for /transactions. So this is what our front end is going to make a request to and get the response from Up's API. Now this is going to need to be an async endpoint because in here we're going to be making a request to Up's API. So to do that, we're going to use Axios and we're going to use the get method and make a get request to that URL. So we're going to require the Axios package and then we're going to specify our URL, which we can get from Postman or the documentation. So for this, we will be grabbing transactions. And the other thing we're going to have to attach is our header. So we're going to have to attach that bearer token. So to do that, we're going to create these options outside of our route, just because we're going to be reusing these a few times. So we want some options with some headers, and we want our authorization header to be set to bearer, and then our actual token. So we can go and grab that again from Postman, or we can go and create a new token in Up's API in the documentation. Okay, So we could do it like this and have our token actually in our Node application, but then if we were to commit this to GitHub or something like that, then our access token would be there for anyone to use. So what we're going to do is we're going to move this into a separate file, which is going to be a .env file. So this is where we can keep basically our application's secrets. So let's take that token and let's create a new a new environment variable called token. And then here we can just say we want our authorization token to have bearer space and then process.env.token. And then we need to tell our application to actually read in this token. So we need to install another package. So we'll stop our server and install a package called .env. And then we need to require in .env and call the config function. And that's going to automatically read in any environment variables that we specify in this .env file. So now we have our token, and we could actually take our URL, our API URL, and we could also specify that in here. We could just specify it as base, because we might want to use that a couple of times. And then again, when we're making a request, our URL is just going to be process.env.base. And in this case, we don't want transactions on the end because we want to be able to call some different endpoints. So let's get rid of that. And here we want our URL to be that base/transactions. Okay, so let's just quit our server again because we've been playing with different environment variables. So we need to quit our server and make sure that it's loaded those in. And now if we go to port 5000/transactions, so if we call our new endpoint, okay, so this looks like it hasn't actually sent us back our response, and that's because we're not actually telling it to send anything back yet. So we haven't used our response. So what we're going to say here is that we want to grab data back and await our request to the Up API, and then we just want to send that data back as the response. So there we go. If we refresh, you'll see that we get all of our transactions back. So this endpoint is now working correctly. Okay, so we want to use the same endpoint to be able to serve up multiple pages. So we want to be able to pass through to this /transactions endpoint which page we want to view. So if we want to view page 2 or 3 of our transactions, we want to be able to support that with this endpoint. So if we have a look at our request, we actually have a request.url, which is going to give us which URL has been requested from our API. So if I refresh this, you'll see that we have /transactions. So that's good. If we wanted to pass across that additional information for the page, so if I scroll down to the bottom here where we've got links and then we've got a link to our second page, I'm just going to copy that. And I'm just going to clean it up a little bit here. So we don't want quotations and we don't want all of this. We just want to go from /transactions and then all of that stuff. If we make a request for that here, you'll see that we're still getting our original transactions. So if we come down to next here, you'll see that this is the thing that we actually requested and previous is still set to null. So we haven't actually moved on to the second page. So we want to be able to support this. But if we have a look here, our the URL that was actually requested has this big query string that tells us what we're actually looking for. So rather than going base and /transactions, we can actually just go base and then whatever our request.url is. So if I get rid of this and we save, if I now go to this page and scroll all the way down, you'll see that we have a previous and next is set to null. So we've actually moved on to that second page. And if I get rid of this, you'll see that we're back on that first page. We've got our first set of results where previous is set to null and next is set to page 2. So the last thing we're going to do here is a little bit of cleanup on the URLs, because as we mentioned earlier, we want our front end to be as dumb as possible. So we don't want our front end knowing about Up's API. We just want the front end to make requests to us, and we'll proxy those through. So right now, if we were to send back all of this data with next set to a request to Up's API, then when we're trying to get the next result set from our front end, it's going to be making a request directly to the API instead of through us. So we are going to use this little convenience function that I built earlier to relativify our links. So this is basically just if we do have a previous, replace the API, Up's API with nothing. So this is just going to give us everything from the slash onwards. So slash transactions or slash accounts or whatever we want. The next thing we're going to do is when we get back our data, we're going to create a new object for our relative data, which is going to spread in all the data that we got back from Up's API. And then it's just going to overwrite the links section with whatever we get back from our relativify function when we pass in our data.links. And now we just need to, I'll get rid of that so we can see it. And then we just need to pass back our relative data. So now if I save this and we make a request for our transactions, when I scroll down to the bottom here, you'll see that the next page is slash transactions and then the pages. So we don't have any of that Up API stuff. And if I actually copy this and paste it in up here, we'll get page 2. So now when we scroll down, we've got previous, which is set back to our original page, and then next is set to null. So we're now handling that pagination correctly. And we're doing it all with this one endpoint. So this endpoint can pass through that information. Awesome, that's it for this video. In the next video, we'll be looking at building our React application. So how we can actually make a request to this and then get back the data from Up's API. Awesome, see you on the next one.